The laughter reached Nicholas Vance before he saw the table. It came from the far side of the restaurant, quick and badly concealed, the kind of laughter people produced when they were trying not to be noticed. Nicholas stopped just inside the glass doors of a rooftop dining room in downtown San Francisco and looked toward the sound. He recognized 3 people near the bar immediately. Evan Cole, his longtime friend and chief operating officer, lifted a menu too late to hide his face. Brooke Ellis, who had known Nicholas since college, stared determinedly at a candle. Marcus Reed, a consultant who treated every social event like a competition, had a phone angled against a water glass. Nicholas narrowed his eyes. They were not supposed to be there. The hostess smiled. "Mr. Vance, your guest arrived a few minutes ago." That was when he saw her. She sat alone near the windows in a deep green dress, one hand resting on a small leather purse, the other wrapped around a glass of water she had barely touched. She was a plus-size Filipina woman in her mid-30s, with dark hair pinned loosely behind one ear, and an expression so composed that Nicholas almost missed the tension in her shoulders. Almost. She looked toward him, then toward the people near the bar, then back at him. Nicholas suddenly understood that whatever his friends had planned, she was not in on it. He walked to the table. The woman stood. "Amelia Santos." "Mia," she said. Her voice was steady, but only just. "And you must be Nicholas." "Nico is fine." He offered his hand. "I'm glad you came." For a second she seemed surprised by the simplicity of the sentence. Then she smiled. "So am I. I think." He laughed softly and pulled out her chair before taking his own seat. Somewhere behind him, the laughter stopped. 4 hours earlier, Nicholas had been in a conference room 40 floors above Market Street, arguing about windows. His company, Vance Urban Partners, was preparing a major mixed-use redevelopment on the edge of the city. Investors cared about square footage, parking ratios, and projected returns. Nicholas cared about those things too, but that afternoon he had spent 20 minutes objecting to a row of apartments, whose bedrooms would receive almost no direct daylight. "You build places for people," he had said. "People notice whether a room feels alive." Evan had waited until the meeting ended before dropping into the chair across from his desk. "You know what else makes people feel alive?" Nicholas did not look up from his laptop. "This is going to be irritating, isn't it? A date? No. You didn't even let me finish. I've heard your endings." Brooke entered carrying 2 coffees and an expression that made Nicholas immediately suspicious. "You are 39, she said. "Thank you for the update. You work 12-hour days, sometimes 11. You have more conversations with zoning attorneys than actual human beings. Zoning attorneys are technically human." Brooke ignored him. "We found someone interesting." Nicholas leaned back. "Define interesting." Marcus appeared at the doorway. "Someone you would never choose for yourself." That is the least reassuring thing any of you could say. They insisted it was harmless. One dinner, no expectations. A reservation had already been made. Brooke said the woman was thoughtful. Evan said she worked in community education. Marcus added, with unnecessary drama, that Nicholas needed to stop treating life as if every decision required a feasibility study. What none of them explained was why they were enjoying the plan so much. Across the Bay Area, in a small cultural center in Daly City, Mia Santos had received a very different version of the invitation. She was standing on a folding ladder, adjusting photographs for an upcoming neighborhood exhibit, when her phone buzzed. Mia had been born in Quezon City and moved to California with her parents when she was 12. She still remembered the first winter she spent in Daly City when the fog seemed to swallow entire blocks by late afternoon. Her mother had called it a sky that forgot where the ground was. The message came from Brooke. "Hi, Mia. We have a mutual connection through the Bay Heritage Network. This may sound random, but I know someone I think you'd enjoy talking to. He's smart, a little too serious, and genuinely kind. Would you consider dinner tonight?" Mia read it twice. Her co-worker, Lena Park, noticed immediately. "What happened?" "Someone asked me on a blind date." Lena climbed onto the edge of a display table and grinned. "That sentence already sounds dangerous." "I agree. Are you going?" "No." "You answered very quickly." That is because I have excellent judgment. Lena crossed her arms. You have excellent judgment about grant applications. Your judgment about your own life is suspicious. Mia gave her a look, but she was smiling. Dating was not frightening to her. It was simply exhausting. Too many introductions began with people performing versions of themselves they could not sustain. Too many evenings felt like interviews, where both sides quietly measured whether the other person fit an invisible checklist. Mia had reached a stage in life where she preferred honesty to chemistry manufactured under restaurant lighting. Still, something about the message bothered her in a different way. She searched Nicholas Vance's name. The results made her nearly drop the phone. Magazine profiles, real estate interviews, photographs from charity galas. A business estimate placing his net worth well into 8 figures. Lena leaned over her shoulder. Oh, exactly? That is a lot of buildings. That is a lot of reasons not to go. Her phone rang. It was her mother. Mia answered in Tagalog before switching naturally into English, as she often did with family. Teresa Santos was preparing dinner and wanted to know whether Mia would stop by on the way home. Mia mentioned the invitation. There was a pause. Then Teresa said, "Do you want to go?" "I don't know." "That was not my question." Mia smiled despite herself. "I'm curious." "Then curiosity is enough for dinner. What if we have nothing in common?" "Then you finish your meal and come home." "What if he thinks this was a mistake?" Teresa's answer came calmly. "Then it will be his mistake to think." Mia looked across the cultural center at the photographs she had spent weeks arranging. Families opening shops, children graduating, grandparents dancing at community halls, ordinary lives made meaningful because someone had bothered to preserve them. She realized she had been asking the wrong question. The evening did not need to become anything. It only needed to be real. She typed back that she would come. Now, hours later, seated across from Nicholas while his friends pretended not to watch, Mia studied the man in front of her. He did not look embarrassed. He looked annoyed, not at her, at them. Nicholas glanced toward the bar one last time, then returned his attention to Mia. "I should probably tell you something." Her fingers tightened around the edge of the menu. "What?" "The people over there are friends of mine." Mia followed his glance. "I guessed." "They were not invited by me." "That part I also guessed," Nicholas exhaled. "I don't know what they're doing." Mia held his gaze for several seconds. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed. "Good," she said. "Good? At least there's one thing we already have in common." "What's that?" "Neither of us knows what this date is supposed to be." For the first time all evening, Nicholas smiled without looking over his shoulder. And 3 tables away, the people who had expected an awkward disaster began to realize they had miscalculated. The waiter had barely left with their drink order when Nicholas asked the question Mia least expected. "What is the oldest thing in this city that you wish more people noticed?" She blinked. "That is not a normal first date question." "I've been accused of being bad at normal." "I saw the articles." Nicholas groaned. "You looked me up." "Of course I looked you up. A stranger invited me to dinner with a millionaire. I considered that basic preparation." He laughed, and something in Mia relaxed. She glanced through the window at the layers of rooftops stretching toward the bay. "There's an old commercial building south of Market," she said. "Nothing spectacular from the street. People walk past it every day. But for decades, different immigrant families rented the upstairs rooms, and the businesses downstairs changed with every generation. A tailor, a grocery, a print shop, a tutoring center. If you only look at the property records, it's a rectangle with a price. If you listen to the people who used it, it's almost a biography." Nicholas leaned forward. "You talk about buildings like they remember things. Maybe people make them remember. That sounds like something you've said before. I say it constantly. My co-workers are tired of me." "I'm not." The words were simple. Mia still noticed them. Near the bar, Brooke whispered to Evan, "Why is he asking her questions?" Evan stared at her. "Because that is usually what people do on dates." "You know what I mean." Brooke glanced at Nicholas, who was listening while Mia explained how her cultural center collected family photographs before old albums disappeared into closets or storage boxes. He does not listen like that when he's being polite. Their plan had not been cruel in their minds. That was how they had justified it. For years, Nicholas had dated within the same narrow professional circle: attorneys, executives, investors, founders. His friends had teased him about treating relationships like networking events. Marcus finally suggested arranging the most unlikely match they could find, someone whose life seemed almost opposite to Nicholas's. When Brooke found Mia through a community preservation contact, the contrast seemed irresistible. Mia worked for a non-profit. Nicholas built luxury projects. Mia gave walking tours of historic neighborhoods. Nicholas negotiated land deals. Mia came from a close Filipino family in Daly City. Nicholas lived alone in a minimalist condominium overlooking the Embarcadero. What they had failed to consider was that Mia was not a prop in their lesson. At the table, the conversation shifted to food. Mia smiled when Nicholas admitted that he survived mostly on takeout and whatever appeared in conference rooms. "My mother would consider that evidence of a failed civilization." "Is she strict?" "No, that would be easier. She's persuasive." "How?" "She asks whether you're hungry, and somehow 5 minutes later you're carrying 3 containers home." Nicholas nodded gravely. "That sounds dangerous. You would not survive a Filipino family gathering." "Why not?" "You would say you're full." "That seems reasonable." "That is where you would make your first mistake." He laughed again. Mia described Sunday lunches in Daly City, where her mother Teresa cooked enough for twice the expected number of people, because someone always brought a cousin, a neighbor, or a friend. Her father Ramon managed a small accounting practice and still insisted on printing directions, even though everyone used phones. Her younger brother Joel was a physical therapist in San Mateo and believed no family conversation was complete until he had turned it into an argument about basketball. Nicholas listened with the strange feeling that she was describing not a household, but a climate, something warm and noisy that surrounded everyone inside it. "My family is quieter," he said. "Small? Just my mother and me mostly. She lives in Monterey now." "Do you see her often?" "Not often enough." Mia noticed the way he answered without excuses. "Work?" "Work is the excuse." "And the reason?" Nicholas looked at her, surprised. "You really do ask difficult questions." "You started it." He smiled, then considered his answer. "I think I got used to believing that being busy meant I was needed. After a while, you stop asking whether the things that need you are the things you actually need." Mia did not respond immediately. That was the first moment she saw the distance between the public version of Nicholas Vance and the man sitting across from her. He was confident, certainly, comfortable with money, status, decisions. But there was also a restlessness beneath him, as if stillness made him confront questions he preferred to solve with calendars. Their dinner arrived. For several minutes, they ate while discussing the strange architecture of San Francisco, from narrow Victorian facades to glass towers that seemed designed for entirely different cities. Then Mia mentioned a redevelopment plan near the waterfront. Nicholas's fork paused. "Which one?" "The Harbour Line project." He looked at her, carefully. "What do you think of it?" Mia gave a small laugh. "You're asking the wrong person." "Why?" "Because I've been complaining about it for 6 months. Nicholas placed his fork down. "Go on." "The renderings are beautiful," she said. "That's part of the problem." He raised an eyebrow. "They make the area look empty before the new development arrives. Clean sidewalks, perfect light, no delivery vans, no old storefront signs, no people who already belong there. It creates the impression that nothing important exists until a developer draws something new." Nicholas's expression changed, though she could not read how. Mia continued. "I'm not against development. Cities have to change. But sometimes, the language around projects makes existing communities sound like obstacles instead of participants. What would you do differently?" I would ask people what they want to keep before deciding what should be replaced. He was quiet. Mia suddenly became self-conscious. I'm sorry, this is probably terrible dinner conversation. No, it's good dinner conversation. You say that because you're not the developer. Nicholas looked directly at her. I am. The restaurant seemed to lose sound. Mia stared at him. You're what? Vance Urban Partners is the lead developer on Harbor Line. Her eyes widened. Oh. Nicholas waited. Mia closed her eyes for 1 second. I just criticized your project for approximately 7 uninterrupted minutes. Closer to 9. That is worse. I disagree. She looked at him again, searching for offense. There was none. Why didn't you stop me? Because you didn't know who I was when you formed the opinion. That generally helps with honesty. Exactly. Mia sat back. You really aren't angry? I'm trying to decide whether I'm embarrassed that I never noticed what you noticed. The answer surprised her more than any compliment could have. Nicholas pulled out his phone, not to check a message, but to type a note. What are you doing? Writing down what you said about the renderings. Mia stared at him. You take notes on dates? Only when the date points out a flaw in a $60 million project. She began laughing. Nicholas joined her. Near the bar, Marcus lowered his phone. This is not going the way it was supposed to. Brooke's smile had disappeared. Evan looked toward Mia and then at the reservation confirmation on his own phone. For the first time, he seemed uncomfortable. What exactly was it supposed to do? He asked. Marcus frowned. Teach Nico to loosen up. Brooke looked at him. By making a stranger part of a joke she never agreed to. No one answered. At the table, Mia and Nicholas had already moved on to another subject. Neither of them noticed that the people responsible for the evening were beginning to understand something far more serious than whether their prank had succeeded. They had created a test for Nicholas, but they were the ones failing it. By the time dessert menus arrived, Mia had forgotten to be nervous. That realization unsettled her more than the nerves had. She had walked into the restaurant prepared to survive an awkward hour. Instead, nearly 2 hours had passed. Nicholas had asked about the exhibit she was organizing, remembered the name of her co-worker, and even requested an explanation of why daily city fog behaved as if it had a personal disagreement with sunlight. Mia had learned that he loved old movie theaters, hated networking breakfasts, and still kept a dented mechanical pencil from his first architecture internship, even though he no longer drew professionally. None of it fit the version of him she had constructed from search results. Cheesecake? Nicholas asked. I'm considering it. That sounds more serious than most investment decisions I make. It has consequences. Then we should diversify. 1 cheesecake, 1 chocolate tart. You really do turn everything into business language. I'm working on it. The waiter had just approached when Marcus appeared beside the table. Nico. Nicholas looked up. His expression cooled immediately. Marcus. Mia followed his gaze toward Brooke and Evan. Neither looked amused anymore. Marcus gave an awkward grin. So, he said, this lasted longer than expected. Mia's smile faded. Nicholas set the dessert menu down. What does that mean? Marcus glanced at Mia as if he had only now remembered she was part of the conversation. Nothing. I'm joking. Then explain the joke. The calmness in Nicholas's voice made the question sharper. Brooke stood and crossed the room quickly. Marcus, go sit down. He knows it was a setup. Nicholas's eyes moved to Brooke. I know it was a blind date. Brooke stopped. That's not what he means, Mia said quietly. No one answered her. She looked from one face to another. What was the setup? Evan came over last. He did not sit. Brooke pressed her lips together. We thought the two of you were completely different. Mia waited. And? Marcus shrugged, trying to recover the casual tone that had already disappeared. We thought Nico would take one look at the whole situation and realize we had engineered the most unlikely date possible. The whole situation, Mia repeated. Evan stepped in. Your work, his work, your lifestyles. The fact that he only dates people from the same corporate circles. We thought it would be awkward for 10 minutes. Then we'd reveal ourselves and everyone would laugh. Mia stared at him. Everyone? The word landed quietly. Brooke's face changed. Mia continued. Because I didn't know there was a joke. No, Brooke admitted. So I was not included in the part where everyone gets to laugh. Nicholas turned slowly toward his friends. You arranged a stranger's evening so you could teach me a lesson? Marcus lifted both hands. It sounds worse when you say it like that. It sounds accurate when I say it like that. A few nearby diners had begun paying attention, not because anyone was shouting, but because the table had gone unnaturally still. Mia's cheeks were warm. She hated that sensation, not because she was ashamed, but because it meant other people could see that the moment mattered. She reached for her purse. Nicholas looked at her. Mia, I need to go. I understand. That answer stopped her for half a second. He did not tell her she was overreacting. He did not ask her to stay so he could fix the evening. He simply stood and moved aside so she could leave without having to squeeze past him. Then Marcus said, Come on, it wasn't meant to hurt anybody. Mia turned back. She looked at him without anger. That doesn't make it thoughtful. Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it. Mia nodded once to Nicholas. Thank you for dinner. She walked toward the elevator. Nicholas remained at the table long enough to place his card beside the bill. Then he looked at his friends. Brooke spoke first. We misjudged it. No, Nicholas said. You misjudged her. Evan lowered his eyes. Nicholas pointed toward Marcus's phone. Were you recording? Marcus hesitated. It was just for us. Delete it. Nico, delete it now. Marcus unlocked the phone. Nicholas waited until he watched the file disappear. Then he left. Outside, the evening had turned cold. The wind moved quickly between buildings, carrying the mixed sounds of traffic, buses, and conversations from people walking toward Union Square. Mia stood beneath the restaurant awning, looking at her phone. Her rideshare was 6 minutes away. Nicholas stopped several feet from her. I'm not going to ask you to come back inside. Good. I wanted to apologize. You didn't arrange it. They're my friends. That doesn't make you responsible for every bad idea they have. No, but I ignored the signs because I assumed whatever they were doing would be harmless. Mia looked at him. He did not seem concerned with defending himself. That mattered. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. When you first saw me, did you know? Know what? That they were trying to create an unlikely match. Nicholas thought before answering. I knew something was wrong when I saw them watching us. That isn't what I asked. He nodded. No, I didn't look at you and understand their joke. Mia held his gaze. Then what did you think? Nicholas glanced toward the glass doors behind them, where his friends were still visible inside. I thought you looked like someone who had arrived ready to leave if the evening became ridiculous. Mia almost smiled. That is very close. And then I wondered why I was the one being evaluated when you were the person who had taken the bigger risk. What bigger risk? You came here without knowing anyone connected to me. I came to a restaurant chosen by people I've known for years. You had less reason to trust the situation than I did. Mia looked toward the street. Her car was now 4 minutes away. You know what bothered me most? She asked. What? They thought they could predict us from categories. Millionaire developer, non-profit worker, Pacific Heights, Daily City, corporate events, community exhibits. Nicholas smiled faintly. You forgot architect who has strong opinions about bedroom windows. And Filipina woman whose mother thinks leftovers are a form of currency. There's that too. The tension eased, but only slightly. Mia became serious again. I don't want to become the story your friends tell about the night you proved them wrong. You won't. You can't promise that. No, Nicholas said. But I can choose not to tell it that way. Her rideshare pulled to the curb. Mia opened the rear door, then paused. Nico? Yes? For what it's worth, I meant what I said about Harbor Line. He laughed softly. I know. And the renderings really are too clean. I know that now, too. She got into the car. Nicholas watched the tail lights disappear into traffic. Then he remained beneath the awning, hands in his coat pockets, looking up at the tower where his friends were waiting. For years he had believed maturity meant staying calm, making decisions quickly, and not allowing emotions to disrupt the plan. That night he understood something different. Sometimes maturity was recognizing that the plan itself was the problem, and sometimes the most important thing a person could do after an error was not explain it away, but let the discomfort teach them where to look next. The next morning, Nicholas arrived at the office before 7. He usually liked the building at that hour. The elevators were quiet. The lights of the Bay Bridge were still visible through the grey morning. For 30 or 40 minutes, before meetings began and phones started ringing, the entire company seemed to exist only as drawings pinned to walls and unfinished decisions waiting on desks. That morning, the silence felt less peaceful. He opened the Harbour Line presentation. The first rendering filled his screen. Mia had been right. The image showed a perfect pedestrian plaza under impossible sunlight. New trees, new storefronts, new residents carrying coffee. Not a single delivery truck, faded sign, existing tenant or ordinary inconvenience appeared anywhere. It was not dishonest exactly. It was incomplete in a way Nicholas had never questioned. He zoomed in. Then he opened the site photographs taken 6 months earlier. There were people everywhere. A family restaurant with hand-painted lettering, a repair shop with bicycles hanging from the ceiling, a small market whose front window held notices in English, Spanish, and Tagalog, an elderly man sitting outside a laundromat reading a newspaper. None of them existed in the future his company had presented. Nicholas sat back. At 8:15, Evan knocked on the open door. "Can I come in?" "You already did." Evan entered and closed the door behind him. "I'm sorry." Nicholas did not respond. Evan sat. "It was my idea to make the date a contrast. Marcus turned it into a spectacle. Brooke found Mia. I knew they were planning to watch. I should have stopped it." "Yes," Evan exhaled. "I thought you would be annoyed for 5 minutes, then laugh." "That is because every version of the evening you imagined was about me." Evan looked up. Nicholas turned his monitor slightly so the Harbour Line rendering faced him. "That is the problem. What does the project have to do with last night?" "Maybe more than I want it to." Evan studied the screen. Nicholas continued. "We keep drawing futures as if the present is empty. Last night you arranged a person into a story without asking whether she wanted the role. This is different, obviously, but the habit underneath it is familiar. That is a lot to put on one bad, blind date." "Maybe." Evan remained quiet. Nicholas looked at him. "I'm not ending a 20-year friendship over one terrible idea, but I need you to understand why I'm not laughing." "I do." "No. You understand that I'm angry." "That isn't the same thing." Evan nodded slowly. "What do you want me to do?" "Nothing performative. Apologize to Mia once if she's willing to hear it. Don't ask her to make you feel better. And stop Marcus from turning this into an office story." "I will." After Evan left, Nicholas called the Harbour Line design team. He asked for a meeting that afternoon. Then, after staring at Mia's number for nearly a minute, he did not call her. He sent one message instead. "I meant what I said. I'm sorry about last night. I won't keep contacting you. If you ever want to continue the conversation about Harbour Line, professionally or otherwise, I'd like to listen." Mia read the message during breakfast at her parents' house in Daly City. Teresa Santos was packing rice and vegetables into containers, despite Mia repeatedly insisting she had food at home. Ramon Santos sat at the table wearing reading glasses and studying a printed utility bill as though it contained a hidden theorem. Mia had told them almost everything about the date. Almost. She left out how much she had enjoyed the first 2 hours. That felt more complicated. Her brother Joel arrived without knocking, carrying pastries from a bakery down the street. "I heard there was a millionaire." Mia looked at her mother. Teresa focused intensely on a container lid. "Information travels," she said. "Within 12 hours?" "This is a family, not a government agency." Joel sat across from Mia. "So, do we like him?" "We do not have a committee vote. That means maybe. It means stop asking. Ramon finally looked up from the bill. Was he respectful? Mia considered the question. Yes. Then whatever his friends did belongs to them. It affected me. Of course. Ramon folded the paper. But do not give other people so much authority that their foolishness gets to rewrite your judgment of someone else. Mia stared at her father. Joel pointed at him. That was surprisingly good. Ramon frowned. Why surprisingly? The room dissolved into argument, and Mia laughed for the first time since leaving the restaurant. Later that morning, she returned to the cultural center. Lena was hanging labels beneath photographs. How was it? Complicated. That is not enough information, Mia told her. Lena listened without interrupting, which was how Mia knew she was taking it seriously. When the story ended, Lena said, Do you want me to dislike him? No. Do you dislike him? Mia looked toward the exhibit wall. No. That sounds inconvenient. Extremely. Her phone buzzed with Nicholas's message again because she had opened it without replying. Lena watched her expression. Is that him? Yes. What does he want? To listen. That sounds suspiciously reasonable. Mia locked the phone. She had no intention of seeing him again soon. She also had no intention of pretending the conversation between them had meant nothing. Across the city that afternoon, Nicholas sat with architects, planners, and community relations staff around a 12-foot conference table. He projected the Harbor Line rendering onto the wall. What's missing? He asked. The design director frowned. From the image? Yes. A planner mentioned transit access. Someone else suggested more landscaping. Another person said the signage needed work. Nicholas shook his head. People who are already there. The room went quiet. He switched to the site photographs. I want a tenant map. Every current business, every lease expiration, every community organization within half a mile. I want to know what residents have asked for in previous meetings, and what we dismissed because it didn't fit the project assumptions. The finance director leaned forward. Are we changing the plan? I don't know yet. That could affect the schedule. I know. And the returns. I know that too. Nicholas looked around the room. I'm not asking anyone to pretend development can make everyone happy. I'm asking us to stop pretending a clean rendering is the same thing as a complete answer. For the next 2 hours, the meeting became harder than usual. That was precisely why Nicholas did not end it early. By evening, his whiteboard was covered with questions instead of decisions. He stood alone before it, strangely relieved. For most of his career, he had built confidence by being the person with the answer. Now he was beginning to see that leadership might require something more difficult. The willingness to remain in a room long enough to discover that the first answer had been too easy. 2 weeks passed before Nicholas saw Mia again. He did not arrange it. That mattered to both of them. The Bay Heritage Network held its annual neighborhood showcase on a Saturday afternoon inside a renovated public library branch near Mission Street. The event was modest. Folding tables, poster boards, local history projects, children carrying scavenger hunt sheets, and volunteers repeatedly apologizing for a microphone that refused to cooperate. Nicholas attended because Vance Urban Partners had sponsored a preservation grant the previous year. Normally he would have stayed 20 minutes, shaken hands, taken a photograph and left for another commitment. This time he cancelled the commitment. He walked through the exhibits slowly. Then he found Mia. She stood beside a wall of black and white photographs beneath a sign that read, "The blocks we carry with us." She wore a navy blouse, wide-leg trousers, and the focused expression of someone answering the same question for the 7th time without making the 7th person feel late. Nicholas stopped several feet away. A little girl was pointing at a photograph of a grocery store. "Why are all those cans in the window?" Mia crouched slightly so they were at eye level. "Because the owner wanted people walking past to know exactly what they could find inside." "Did they have cereal?" "Almost. Definitely." "Good cereal?" "That depends on who you ask." The girl seemed satisfied and ran back to her father. Mia stood. Then she saw Nicholas. Her expression changed, but not in a way he could immediately interpret. "Hi." "Hi." He lifted the program in his hand as if it were evidence. "I'm actually supposed to be here." "I know. Your company's logo is on the back. I was hoping you wouldn't notice that. I work in a non-profit. We notice sponsors." He smiled. "I won't keep you from your exhibit." "You can look at it." Nicholas did. The photographs were not grand landmarks. They showed ordinary storefronts, family kitchens, barbershops, school sidewalks, restaurant counters, and apartment stairwells. Beside each image was a short story collected from someone who had lived or worked there. One photograph showed a narrow storefront in Daly City, where three sisters had opened a tailoring business in the 1980s. Another showed a Filipino bakery whose first owner had saved enough money to bring his parents to California. A third showed a community room decorated for a graduation party, chairs mismatched and tables crowded with food. Nicholas spent nearly 10 minutes reading every caption. "You were serious," he said. "About what?" "Buildings remembering things." Mia looked at the photographs. "I told you I was." He nodded toward a picture of an aging corner market. "Harbour Line has a store like that?" "Several." "I know now." Mia looked at him. Nicholas continued. "We mapped every current tenant. We're setting up small group meetings before the next design phase." Her expression remained careful. "Because of our dinner?" "Because our dinner made me realize I should have done it already." "That is a better answer." "I thought it might be." She almost smiled. A volunteer approached Mia and asked whether she could help locate more name tags. Mia excused herself. Nicholas moved on. He did not wait beside her table. He did not use the event as an opportunity to reopen a personal conversation. He spent the next hour talking to other exhibitors, including a retired teacher, documenting neighborhood murals, and a group of teenagers recording interviews with longtime residents. Mia noticed. She also noticed that he asked questions without mentioning Harbour Line, unless someone else did first. Near the end of the afternoon, volunteers began stacking chairs. Nicholas was helping carry a box of unused programs when Mia approached him. "You know sponsors usually leave before cleanup. I'm experimenting with a new reputation. Manual labor. Radical, I know." She took the other side of the box. Together they carried it toward a storage room. Mia said, "Brooke emailed me." Nicholas stopped. "I didn't ask her to." "I know. She made that very clear." "What did she say?" "That she was sorry." "She didn't explain herself. She didn't ask me to forgive her. She said she had turned me into a concept before meeting me." Nicholas looked down at the box between them. "That sounds like Brooke when she's actually thought about something." I appreciated it. They placed the programs on a shelf. Mia leaned against the doorframe. "Marcus? He has been quieter. That might be healthy. For everyone." They walked back into the main room. Most visitors had left. The late afternoon light came through tall windows, making dust visible above the empty tables. Nicholas hesitated. "I owe you something else." Mia raised an eyebrow. "If it's another apology, I'm reaching my weekly limit." "It's not." He reached into his jacket and unfolded a printed image. It was a new preliminary Harbour Line rendering. Mia studied it. The architecture had not radically changed, but the street level had. Several existing storefronts remained integrated into the block. The public space looked less pristine and more inhabited. There were delivery zones, shaded seating, community notice boards, and signs marking preserved facades. Mia looked up. "This is real." "It's one option. We're testing costs." "You don't have to show me this." "I know." "Then why?" "Because you were the first person who made me see what the old image was erasing." Mia looked back at the page. For a moment, neither spoke. Then she pointed to the corner. "That plaza is still too wide." Nicholas laughed. "I knew this was a mistake." "It looks expensive and windy." "It is expensive. And probably windy." He took out a pen. "You're taking notes again?" "I learn slowly." Mia shook her head, smiling. A few minutes later, they stepped outside together. Mission Street was busy with buses, families, bicycles, and people carrying shopping bags. It was not picturesque in the way real estate brochures preferred. It was alive in a way brochures rarely captured. Nicholas looked toward a coffee shop across the street. "I'm going to ask you something, and you can say no without explanation." That sounds ominous. Coffee. Mia considered him. No rooftop restaurant? Absolutely not. No hidden friends? I checked the windows. No feasibility study? I left it at the office. She let the silence stretch just long enough to make him uncertain. Then she nodded toward the crosswalk. One coffee. Nicholas smiled. They crossed the street with the crowd. Neither called it a second date. Neither called it a fresh start. It was something smaller and more honest than that. Two people choosing, this time without anyone else arranging the terms, to continue a conversation that had survived an imperfect beginning. And for Nicholas, that small choice felt more significant than any dramatic gesture could have. Because for once, he was not trying to control what came next. He was simply willing to show up for it. The coffee shop across Mission Street was narrow, crowded, and loud enough that nobody could accidentally listen to anyone else's conversation. Mia liked it immediately. Nicholas looked around at the mismatched chairs, the chalkboard menu, and the line that curved around a shelf of local magazines. "This is already more believable than the rooftop," he said, "because the table is sticky. Because nobody appears to have reserved the room around us." Mia smiled. Progress. They ordered coffee and found 2 seats beside the front window. Outside, buses sighed at the curb, while pedestrians moved through the late afternoon in coats and backpacks. Nicholas set the folded Harbour Line rendering on the table, but did not open it. Mia noticed. "You brought homework." "I was trying not to make coffee feel like a meeting." "And carrying a redevelopment plan helped?" "No. I realized that after I crossed the street." She laughed. For a while they talked about anything except Harbour Line. Mia told him that her brother Joel had once tried to teach their father how to use a shared digital calendar and had somehow created 17 duplicate family dinners. Nicholas admitted that his mother still mailed handwritten thank you notes after every visit, including visits to his own apartment. "Your mother sounds formal," Mia said. "She is elegant in a way I will never achieve." "Does she know about the blind date?" Nicholas paused. "She knows there was a date." "That sounds carefully edited." "It was. Why?" He looked down at his cup. "Because if I told her my friends arranged an evening around proving they understood my life better than I did, she would ask questions I am not ready to answer." "Such as?" "Why I made it so easy for people to believe they could predict me." Mia studied him. "That is actually a good question. I knew you would say that." He smiled, but the thought stayed with him. For years, Nicholas had been easy to summarize. He worked constantly. He lived in an expensive apartment with almost no personal photographs. He attended the right events, gave money to the right causes, and left before conversations became intimate enough to require anything from him. Even his friends had mistaken consistency for certainty. Mia had done something inconvenient within 2 hours of meeting him. She had made him curious about the parts of his life he had stopped examining. He finally unfolded the rendering. "Can I ask you something? Professional?" "You just ruined coffee." "I know." She leaned closer anyway. Nicholas pointed to the preserved storefronts along the lower edge of the design. "The team thinks we can keep 5 existing businesses in place during construction if we phase the work differently." 5 out of how many? 11 directly affected. What happens to the other 6? Temporary relocation is one option. Another is staged construction with rent support. Mia looked at the drawing carefully. "Have you asked them?" "Not yet." She looked up. "Then you do not have options yet. You have ideas." Nicholas took out his pen. Mia stared at him. "Are you seriously writing that down?" "Yes." "You own a company full of consultants. None of them says things exactly like that." "That should worry you." "It does." The teasing faded into something more thoughtful. Mia traced one finger above the drawing, without touching it. People get nervous when a large project arrives because they assume all the decisions have already been made somewhere else. If you ask them to attend a meeting where the presentation is finished and the choices are already narrowed, they will know the invitation is decorative. Nicholas nodded. So we meet earlier. You listen earlier. He corrected the note. Listen earlier. Mia leaned back. You know I cannot become your unofficial community consultant. I know. I mean it, Nico. I work for an organization that may eventually comment publicly on projects like yours. I cannot blur that because we had one unusual dinner and one coffee. Then we do not blur it. His answer came without disappointment or argument. She watched him for a moment. You are making it difficult to maintain my suspicion. I can do something irritating if it helps. I am sure the opportunity will present itself. He smiled. A few minutes later, Mia's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and groaned. What happened? Nicholas asked. My mother wants to know if I am coming to Sunday lunch. That sounds normal. She added a second question. Mia turned the screen toward herself as if protecting classified information. Nicholas waited. She sighed. She wants to know whether the man from the complicated dinner eats Filipino food. Nicholas nearly choked on his coffee. You told her you were having coffee with me? I did not. Then how does she know? Mia typed a reply. There are systems in my family that I do not fully understand. Nicholas laughed. She invited me? No. Mia's phone buzzed again. She read the message. Then her expression changed. Nicholas raised an eyebrow. Now. Mia put the phone face down. She says there is always enough food. That sounds like an invitation. It is not officially an invitation until my father pretends he had nothing to do with it. Another message arrived. Mia looked. My father says there is always enough food. Nicholas laughed so loudly that a student at the next table looked over. Mia shook her head, embarrassed and amused at the same time. You do not have to come. Nicholas grew quieter. Would you want me there? That question removed the comedy from the moment. Mia looked through the window at Mission Street. 2 weeks earlier, she had left a restaurant determined not to let someone else's bad judgment determine what happened next. Since then, Nicholas had done nothing dramatic. He had not sent flowers, appeared at her workplace, or turned the evening into a story about rescuing it. He had given her space. He had changed the way he approached Harbour Line without asking for credit. He had come to her exhibit and spent more time listening to strangers than talking about himself. Mia realized she did want him there. That was different from deciding what it meant. Yes, she said. I think I would. Nicholas nodded once. Then I would like to come. You need one warning. Only one? My family asks direct questions. I negotiate with investors. Not the same skill. I will prepare. You cannot prepare. That sentence has never stopped me. They finished their coffee as the light outside softened toward evening. When they stood to leave, Nicholas folded the Harbour Line rendering and put it away. He did not ask for another date. Mia did not define what Sunday lunch would be. They walked together to the corner, then stopped where their routes separated. Sunday at 1, Mia said. Nicholas nodded. Should I bring anything? No. That feels wrong. It is a test. Of what? Whether you can follow instructions. He smiled. I am already concerned. Mia turned toward the transit stop, then looked back. Nico? Yes? Do not wear a suit. He looked down at his jacket. This is not a suit. It is spiritually a suit. She walked away, laughing before he could answer. Nicholas stood on the corner for another second, smiling to himself. The first evening had been arranged by other people because they thought contrast would create comedy. Sunday would be different. For the first time, Mia was inviting him into her world because she had chosen to, and Nicholas understood enough now to know that being welcomed into someone's ordinary life could mean more than being invited anywhere impressive. Nicholas arrived in Daly City at 12:48 on Sunday, carrying a bakery box he had been explicitly told not to bring. Mia opened the door, looked at the box, then looked at him. You failed the first test. I panicked. You had one instruction. I have never arrived at someone's home empty-handed. Corporate training? My mother. Mia considered that and stepped aside. Fine. Your mother outranks me. The Santos house was modest, warm, and already full of voices. Shoes lined the entryway in imperfect rows. Framed family photographs covered one wall. Graduations, birthdays, vacations, cousins crowded around restaurant tables, Teresa and Ramon standing beside Mia and Joel at different ages. Nicholas slowed for half a second. There were more visible memories in the hallway than in his entire apartment. Teresa appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. You came. Nicholas smiled. Thank you for having me, Mrs. Santos. Teresa. Yes, ma'am. She stared at him. Mia whispered, You made it worse. Teresa laughed and hugged Nicholas before he had time to decide whether he was supposed to offer a handshake. Ramon followed more cautiously. Nicholas. Mr. Santos. Ramon. Yes, sir. Mia covered her face. This is painful. Joel appeared behind their father. Give him 10 minutes. He has clearly been raised by thank-you notes. Nicholas pointed at him. You must be Joel. That depends. What did Mia say? Mostly basketball criticism. Joel grinned. I like him. Lunch was not one meal so much as a table that seemed incapable of becoming empty. Teresa had made pancit, chicken adobo, vegetables, rice, lumpia, and 2 dishes Nicholas did not recognize but immediately liked. Every time he believed he had finished, someone moved another serving spoon toward him. He made the mistake of saying, I'm full, exactly once. Teresa looked concerned. You did not like the adobo? I loved it. Then have more. Mia laughed so hard she had to put down her fork. I warned you. Nicholas surrendered his plate. The conversation moved quickly. Ramon wanted to know how long Nicholas had lived in San Francisco. Joel wanted to know whether owning expensive real estate made him less patient with rent increases. Teresa asked whether he called his mother often enough. Mia attempted to intervene only once. Mom. What? It is a normal question, Nicholas answered honestly. Not often enough. Teresa nodded as if confirming a private theory. You should fix that. I think you're right. Mia looked at him across the table and saw that he did not treat her family as an obstacle course. He was attentive without performing. He asked Ramon about his accounting practice and listened to a 10-minute explanation of why paper records would never completely disappear. He let Joel challenge him about the Warriors without pretending to know more than he did. When Teresa explained why she always cooked extra food, he did not turn it into a charming cultural anecdote. He simply helped move dishes when she asked. After lunch, Ramon took coffee into the backyard, while Joel carried plates to the sink. Teresa pointed at Nicholas. You. Sit. He stopped with 3 bowls in his hands. I can help. You are a guest. So is Joel, apparently, Mia said, as her brother disappeared into the living room. I heard that, Joel called. Nicholas followed Mia outside instead. The backyard was small, bordered by a wooden fence and planters Teresa had filled with herbs. Fog hung beyond the roofs, turning the afternoon pale. Mia sat on the back step. You survived. I think your mother is sending me home with enough food for a week. That means she approved your performance. Was I performing? Mia looked at him. No. The answer pleased him more than he expected. Ramon stood several feet away, trimming a plant that did not seem to require trimming. Nicholas suspected he was giving them privacy, while remaining close enough to hear if necessary. Mia noticed too. He is subtle in his own imagination. I respect the effort. They sat quietly for a moment. Nicholas looked through the kitchen window at Teresa rearranging leftovers into containers. My apartment is very quiet, he said. Mia turned toward him. You mentioned that. I used to think I liked it because quiet meant nobody needed anything from me. And now? I am starting to wonder whether I designed my whole life around convenience. Mia did not rush to reassure him. That can be useful, she said, until convenience becomes the only thing you protect. Nicholas smiled faintly. You do realize you never give easy answers. You have enough people who do. That landed harder than she intended. Nicholas did not react defensively. You're probably right. Before Mia could respond, Ramon approached with 2 mugs, one for each of you. Nicholas stood to accept his. Thank you. Ramon sat in a patio chair. Mia says you are changing a project. Mia frowned. I said they were reviewing a project. That is different? Very. Nicholas answered before Mia could redirect the conversation. We are reviewing it. Ramon nodded. Will it cost more? Probably. Will your investors like that? Probably not. Ramon took a sip of coffee. Then you will find out whether you believe your own reasons. Mia stared at her father. Nicholas looked surprised, then amused. Does everyone in this family ask difficult questions? Ramon shrugged. We paid for lunch. Later, when Nicholas was preparing to leave, Teresa handed him 3 containers despite Mia protesting that one would have been sufficient. You can return the containers next time, Teresa said. The phrase stopped Mia. Next time. Teresa seemed not to notice what she had implied. Nicholas did. He accepted the containers without making the moment larger. I will. At the front door, Mia walked him outside. His car was parked halfway down the block. Thank you for today, he said. You should thank my mother. I barely controlled anything. I think that was part of why I liked it. Mia smiled. Then Nicholas looked toward the fog moving above the street. I called my mother this morning. Mia blinked. Because Teresa told you to? Before Teresa told me to. What did you talk about? Nothing. Important. Her garden. A neighbor's renovation. She asked whether I was eating well. And did you tell her the truth? I said I was having lunch with a Filipino family in Daly City. Mia raised an eyebrow. What did she say? That I should not arrive empty-handed. Mia pointed toward the bakery box now sitting empty on the hall table. So that was not panic. It was inherited panic, she laughed. Nicholas became serious again. She also asked who you were. Mia's expression softened. What did you tell her? He thought about the answer. That you work harder to preserve other people's stories than most people work to advertise their own. For once, Mia had no quick response. Nicholas did not use the silence to add anything. He simply smiled, said goodbye, and walked toward his car. Mia remained on the front steps watching him leave. Behind her, the door opened 2 inches. Joel's voice came through the gap. So? Mia did not turn around. Close the door. Is that a positive close the door or a negative close the door? Joel. The door closed. Mia smiled despite herself. The afternoon had not answered what Nicholas would become in her life, but it had revealed something she had not expected. He fit inside an ordinary Sunday without needing to make himself the center of it. And for Mia, who had spent years learning that the most meaningful parts of life rarely announced themselves dramatically, that mattered. 3 days after Sunday lunch, Nicholas walked into a Harbour Line budget meeting carrying a stack of community notes and discovered exactly how expensive listening could become. The revised construction sequence added 6 months. Temporary relocation support for small businesses increased operating costs. Preserving 3 older facades required structural work that had not been included in the first estimate. The wider community process meant consultants, translators, evening meetings, and design revisions. By the time the finance team reached the final slide, the room had become very still. Claire Bennett, the chief financial officer, tapped the number projected on the wall. This is not a small adjustment. I can see that, Nicholas said. We can absorb some of it, but not all of it without changing returns. Evan sat 2 seats away, unusually quiet. One of the senior investment partners, Daniel Ross, folded his arms. We already completed the required outreach. The required outreach is not the same as useful outreach, Nicholas replied. Daniel looked at him carefully. Since when? The question was not hostile. That made it more difficult. Nicholas had built his reputation by moving complicated projects forward. He was the person investors called when approvals were messy, land assemblies were difficult, or schedules had started to slip. He had never considered himself careless. He followed rules. He hired competent teams. He funded community benefits. But Mia's question had stayed with him. Have you asked them? He looked at the tenant map on the wall. Since I realized we were presenting solutions before understanding what people were trying to preserve. Claire turned a page. We can do more. Meetings without redesigning half the ground floor. Then the meetings are theater. Daniel exhaled slowly. Nico, I understand the principle, but you are talking about changing a project after years of work because of concerns that were always present. Nicholas nodded. That is fair. Daniel seemed surprised by the concession. Nicholas continued. The fact that I noticed late does not make the concern less real. The meeting ended without agreement. For the first time in years, Nicholas left a conference room without knowing whether he could persuade everyone to follow him. Across town, Mia was facing a different version of the same problem. The Cultural Centre's director, Evelyn Cho, called her into the office after lunch. I heard you spoke with Nicholas Vance at the showcase. Mia sat down. I did. And before that? Mia knew immediately what the conversation was about. There was a blind date. Evelyn blinked. I did not expect you to say that. Neither did. I expect to go on it. Mia explained the situation briefly, leaving out the private details and emphasizing what mattered professionally. She and Nicholas had met socially. She had expressed personal opinions about Harbour Line, and Vance Urban Partners had since begun a deeper review. Evelyn listened. Do you believe you can remain objective if our organization is asked to comment on the project? Yes. Would the public believe that? Mia paused. That was harder. I don't know. Evelyn nodded. That is the right answer. Mia looked toward the office window. What do you want me to do? For now, disclose the relationship to the board. There is no relationship. Evelyn smiled slightly. Then disclose the possibility of one. Mia looked down. The phrase felt strangely intimate because it was administrative. Evelyn continued. And if the centre takes a formal position on Harbour Line, someone else should lead that work. Mia nodded. It was reasonable. It still disappointed her. She had spent months studying the project. Stepping back felt like surrendering something she cared about just as the conversation was becoming meaningful. That evening, Nicholas called. Mia was at home sorting photographs for a new exhibit. How bad was your day? She asked after hearing his voice. What makes you think it was bad? You said hello like someone had shown you a spreadsheet you disliked. He laughed quietly. Accurate. He told her about the budget meeting. Not the confidential numbers, but enough. Mia listened. So the revised plan is more expensive. Considerably. And people are pushing back. Reasonably, in some cases. She smiled at that. You sound calmer than I expected. I am trying to stop treating disagreement as evidence that somebody has failed to understand me. That seems healthy. I dislike it. She laughed. Then she told him about Evelyn's conversation. Nicholas became quiet. You are stepping away from Harbour Line? If my centre comments formally, yes, someone else will handle it. Because of me. Because I need the work to be trusted. Nicholas leaned back in his office chair, looking out at the lights beyond his windows. I don't want knowing me to cost you something professionally. It isn't costing me, it is a boundary. Still. Nico. He stopped. This is exactly why I told you at coffee that I could not become your unofficial consultant. We can care about the same issue without turning me into the person who validates your decisions. He understood immediately. That is fair. Also, I am still going to tell you when your plazas look windy. That feels less fair. Life is complicated. They talked for another half hour, not about the project. Mia told him that Teresa had already asked whether he had finished the leftovers. Nicholas admitted that he had returned one empty container to his mother by mistake, because Teresa's food had somehow entered his weekly system of containers and bags. You gave my mother's container to your mother. Yes. This is how international incidents begin. Both families are from California. Do not underestimate Tita-level jurisdiction. Nicholas laughed, then asked what the word meant. Mia explained that Tita literally meant aunt, but could also be used for older women close to a family. So your mother has jurisdiction beyond the house. Extensive jurisdiction. The conversation ended gently. Afterward, Nicholas remained at his desk. The revised Harbour Line plan was open beside him. For weeks he had been changing the project, partly because Mia had shown him what he had failed to notice. Now she had deliberately stepped away from any formal influence over the decision. That meant the next choice belonged fully to him. He could not point to Mia if the numbers became difficult. He could not say the community demanded one exact solution when different residents wanted different things. He could not turn her into proof that he was doing the right thing. The responsibility was less comfortable without a simple story around it. Nicholas began to understand that this was the real test. It was easy to change when change earned admiration from someone whose opinion mattered to him. It was harder to decide what he believed when that person deliberately refused to stand behind the decision for him. He closed the rendering and opened a blank document. At the top he typed one question: what would we change if nobody knew whose idea it was? Then he began again. The first Harbour Line listening session was held on a Thursday evening in a recreation centre 3 blocks from the project site. Nicholas arrived early. That alone surprised his team. Normally, the chief executive entered community meetings 5 minutes before the presentation, shook hands with organisers, delivered opening remarks, and left once the technical staff took over. This time, Nicholas helped move chairs because the original arrangement placed the development team at the front of the room and everyone else in rows facing them. "Can we make circles?" he asked. The community relations manager stared at 60 metal chairs. "All of them. As many as possible." By 6:30, the room looked less polished and more useful. Business owners and residents arrived first. Translation headsets were available near the entrance. Large maps were taped to the walls with blank space around them for notes. Mia did not attend as a representative of the cultural centre. She had decided that clearly with Evelyn. But she lived in the region, cared about the neighbourhood, and the session was open to the public. She stood in the doorway for nearly a minute before Nicholas noticed her. He did not wave dramatically. He simply smiled. Mia smiled back and took a seat near the side wall. Nicholas opened the meeting without slides. That surprised everyone too. "We have drawings," he said. "We will show them later. But if we begin with the drawings, we will spend the evening asking you to react to our answers. I would rather start with your questions." A man who owned a small repair shop raised his hand immediately. "How long will construction block our street?" A woman beside him asked. "What happens to businesses that cannot survive 6 months of reduced traffic?" Someone else wanted to know whether the new apartments would include family-sized units. Another person asked why the original plaza removed parking used by older customers. A restaurant owner wanted a guaranteed location for deliveries. Nicholas wrote every question on a large pad. After 40 minutes, the page was full. The development team had barely spoken. Mia watched the tension in Nicholas's shoulders increase with each new concern. He was not relaxed. Listening was not effortless for him. She could see the moments when he wanted to explain why a particular problem had already been considered or why a request might be technically difficult. Most of the time he stopped himself. When he did answer, he separated what he knew from what he did not. "We can commit to studying that. I cannot promise that tonight. I understand why the current plan creates that problem." Those sentences seemed ordinary. Mia knew they were not ordinary for a man who had built a career on certainty. During a short break, Nicholas walked toward her. "You came. I am a member of the public. You look very official. I am holding a paper cup." "Exactly." She looked around the room. "This is better." "Better than what?" "The meeting I imagined you would have held a month ago." "That is a dangerously specific compliment. Do not get comfortable." He smiled. Before returning to the front, Nicholas glanced toward one of the maps covered with notes. "People disagree with each other." Mia laughed. "Yes, Nico. That is generally what happens when you ask real people." "I was hoping for one community answer." "There is no community answer. That would be convenient. Remember what we said about convenience?" He nodded. The second half of the meeting became more difficult. One group wanted the project reduced in size. Another wanted more housing, even if the building became taller. Several business owners wanted construction phased slowly. Some nearby residents wanted it finished as quickly as possible. Parents asked for open space. Shop owners worried that too much open space would reduce loading access. Nicholas could not satisfy every request because the requests contradicted one another. For the first time, that complexity did not feel like a failure of the process. It was the process. At the end of the evening, the team presented 3 early design options instead of one finished plan. Nicholas explained what each option improved and what it made more difficult. The conversation changed. People began comparing trade-offs rather than simply opposing a single proposal. Mia noticed something else. No one treated Nicholas like a hero for being there. That pleased her. He was doing his job differently. That did not require applause. After the chairs were stacked and most people had left, Mia found him beside the entrance collecting sticky notes that had fallen from a map. "You missed one," she said. Nicholas looked under a chair. "I am getting too old for this part of community engagement. You are 39. "Exactly." She handed him the note. It read, "Please keep the bench under the old tree." Nicholas read it twice. "Which tree?" Mia pointed through the window toward the far corner of the project block. An old street tree stood beside a faded green bench. "That one. I did not know there was a bench." "Most people do not notice things that are not in the rendering." He looked at her. "I walked into that. Completely." They stepped outside. The night was cool and clear. Traffic moved steadily along the avenue, and the recreation center lights cast long rectangles across the sidewalk. Nicholas hesitated. "Would you like dinner?" Mia looked at him suspiciously. "Where?" "There is a noodle place around the corner." "Do you own it?" "No." "Did your friends reserve a table?" "I am never escaping that question, am I?" "Probably not." They walked to the restaurant. It had 8 tables, laminated menus, and a handwritten sign apologizing for a broken card reader. They sat near the kitchen and ordered without discussion of Harbour Line for almost 20 minutes. Nicholas told Mia that his mother, Eleanor, had seen Teresa's food container on his kitchen counter during a video call and now wanted to meet the woman responsible for feeding my son actual vegetables. Mia laughed. "That sounds dangerous." "I said the same thing about your family. And you survived." "Barely." The conversation slowed. Nicholas looked at her. "Mia, can I ask a question that has nothing to do with buildings?" "That depends on the question. Are we dating?" She nearly dropped her chopsticks. That was unexpectedly direct. "I have been told direct questions are healthy." "By my father?" "Among others." Mia looked down, smiling despite herself. "I think we are finding out whether we want to." Nicholas considered that. "I can work with that." "You do realize it is not a development phase." "I was not going to say anything." "You were thinking it." "I was." She laughed. Then her expression became more serious. "I want this to be separate from Harbour Line." "So do I." "If the project becomes difficult, I do not want us to wonder whether we are talking as 2 people or negotiating around it." Nicholas nodded. "Then we make rules." Mia raised an eyebrow. "You really are incapable of avoiding systems." "Simple rules. No project conversations on dates." "Agreed." "No asking each other for professional favors." "Agreed." "No pretending disagreements are personal." Nicholas paused. "That one might be harder." "Then it is probably the important one." He smiled. "Agreed." When they left the restaurant, Nicholas did not reach for her hand automatically. Mia noticed the hesitation, so she reached for his. They walked 1 block that way quietly before separating at the corner. The gesture was small enough that nobody else would have noticed. But to Nicholas it felt like the clearest answer he had received all week. Not certainty, not a promise. A choice made freely, in the middle of an ordinary sidewalk, with no audience and no one arranging the terms. By the beginning of the following month, Harbour Line had become 2 different projects depending on which conference room Nicholas entered. In community meetings, it was a changing plan shaped by questions, trade-offs, and new information. In investor meetings, it was a schedule under pressure. The difference became impossible to ignore on a Monday morning when Daniel Ross placed two financial models on the table in front of Nicholas. The first reflected the original design. The second reflected the emerging community-centered revision. Nicholas studied the numbers. Daniel waited. "The revised version still works," Nicholas said. "It works," Daniel agreed. "But it produces less return, takes longer, and creates more construction risk." Claire sat beside him with a legal pad full of notes. "There is another issue," she said. "Our financing commitment has a milestone in 6 weeks. If we do not lock the design by then, we may need to renegotiate part of the package." Nicholas looked up. "How difficult?" "Not impossible. Expensive." Daniel leaned forward. "No one is telling you to ignore residents. Keep the relocation fund. Keep the meetings. Had the loading changes, but freeze the basic building now." Nicholas knew what that meant. The preserved facades would likely disappear. The stage construction plan would shrink. The old street-level businesses could be offered money to relocate rather than remain integrated into the project. A month earlier, Nicholas would have approved the compromise before lunch. Now he asked for 48 hours. Daniel gave him a long look. "You usually make decisions faster than this." "I know." "Is that a good thing?" Nicholas looked at both models. "I am trying to find out." That evening he had dinner with Mia. They had agreed not to discuss Harbour Line on dates, so Nicholas did not mention the meeting. The effort showed. Mia watched him rearrange a fork twice while they waited for food at a small Italian restaurant in North Beach. "You are doing something in your head." "I am always doing something in my head." "This is louder." Nicholas smiled. "Work." "Do you want to talk about it?" "No." She nodded. "Good." Mia reached for the bread basket. "You said we were separating the project from this." "We did. So I am not going to make you break the rule because you look worried." Nicholas relaxed slightly. "Thank you." They talked instead about Eleanor Vance's upcoming visit from Monterey. Nicholas had finally told his mother more about Mia, though not every detail of their first dinner. "What did you say?" Mia asked. "That we met through friends." Mia stared at him. "That is technically true in the way a parking ticket is technically correspondence. I am building toward the complete version. You are afraid of your mother." "I respect her ability to ask follow-up questions." Mia smiled. "Teresa will like her." "That is exactly what concerns me." He invited Mia to meet Eleanor the following Saturday. Mia accepted. For most of the evening, Nicholas managed to leave Harbour Line outside the restaurant. Then, as they walked toward his car, Mia's phone buzzed. She stopped. The message came from Lena. "Have you seen the planning packet that went online tonight?" Mia clicked the link. The city had posted updated project materials for the next public review. Among them was a technical memo describing 2 possible directions: a community revision and a schedule preservation alternative based largely on the original ground floor plan. Mia read the summary twice. Nicholas saw her expression. "What happened?" She turned the screen toward him. His stomach tightened. The memo was not confidential. It was a legitimate planning document prepared by his team. He had approved keeping both options active while costs were studied, but seeing the second option written in formal language made it feel more real than it had in the conference room. Mia looked at him. "Were you going to tell me?" Nicholas answered carefully. "Not tonight." "Because of our rule?" "Yes, and because I have not decided anything." She looked back at the screen. The old tension from their first dinner did not return. This was different. No one had tricked her. No promise had been broken, but the project mattered to both of them, and pretending that fact disappeared when they were together suddenly seemed unrealistic. Mia put the phone away. "Nico, I need to say something, and I do not want you to hear it as an argument." "Okay. If you choose the revised plan because you think it is right, choose it. If you decide the costs make another version necessary, then own that decision too." He nodded slowly. But do not protect the community version because you are afraid of what I will think of you. Nicholas looked at her. I am not. Are you sure? He wanted to answer immediately. He stopped himself. That hesitation was the answer. Mia continued gently. I like you. That is exactly why I do not want to become your moral shortcut. Nicholas looked toward the street. Cars moved past in the cool evening light. A cable car bell sounded several blocks away. I do care what you think of me, he admitted. I know. That is not something I am used to. I know that too. He smiled faintly. You sound very confident about my emotional habits. I have evidence. The humor helped. But the question remained. Nicholas folded his arms. What if I genuinely do not know which choice is right? Then stop looking for a choice that proves what kind of person you are. He frowned slightly. Mia stepped closer. Look for the choice you can explain honestly to the people who have to live with it. Nicholas was quiet. That was harder than choosing the option Mia would admire. It was also clearer. They drove home separately that night. Not angry, not distant, but thoughtful. The next morning, Nicholas returned to the Harbour Line site before sunrise. He went alone. The street was barely awake. A bakery employee unlocked a side door. A delivery van idled beside the curb. Lights came on inside the small market. The old bench beneath the tree was empty. Nicholas walked the full block with both financial models in his bag. He stopped outside each existing business. For the first time, he tried to imagine the project without asking which version looked better in a rendering or which option would impress Mia. He asked a more uncomfortable question. What could he defend to the people who had invested money, the people who worked on his team, and the people whose ordinary routines filled this block before his company ever arrived? By 8:30 he was back in the office. Claire and Daniel were already waiting. Nicholas placed the two models on the table. I know what I want to do, he said. Daniel leaned forward. Nicholas did not open either model, yet. But before I tell you, I want one more set of numbers. Claire sighed. What numbers? The cost of preserving the street-level businesses compared with the cost of losing them from the final project entirely. Not just construction cost, leasing risk, vacancy, local retail turnover, everything. Daniel stared at him. You are asking us to put a price on continuity. Nicholas shook his head. No, I'm asking us to stop pretending disruption is free. The room went silent. For the first time since the project had begun, Nicholas was not trying to prove that the most compassionate option and the most profitable option were secretly identical. He was trying to understand the real cost of both, and he knew that whatever the numbers showed next would force him to make the most important decision of his career without hiding behind Mia, his investors, or the version of himself everyone expected him to be. By noon, Claire had rebuilt the Harbour Line model 3 times. Nicholas stood beside the conference room window while numbers moved across the screen behind him. The city below looked simple from 40 stories up. Streets became lines, buildings became shapes, people disappeared. Claire clicked to the final comparison. The revised ground floor plan costs more up front, she said. That part has not changed. But the tenant retention scenario reduces lease-up risk in the first 2 years. Existing businesses bring traffic immediately. We also spend less on vacant storefront incentives. Daniel leaned back in his chair. How much does that close the gap? Not all of it. Nicholas turned from the window. Claire pointed to another line. The original plan still produces the higher projected return. The difference is smaller but real. No one spoke. A month earlier, Nicholas would have treated the answer as permission to stop thinking. Higher return, faster schedule, cleaner execution. The decision would have been framed as responsibility. Now the model looked different to him. Show me the financing impact if we keep the revised street level and shorten the redesign period, he said. Claire changed slides. We could protect the current financing package if we lock the major structural decisions within 4 weeks. That means the community process continues, but not every design question remains open. Daniel nodded. That is a compromise I can defend. Nicholas looked at the tenant map taped to the wall. 11 businesses were marked in different colors. 5 could remain through phased construction. 4 could move temporarily into nearby spaces with company support. 2 occupied areas that could not be preserved exactly as they were. There was no version in which nobody had to adjust. That fact had bothered him at first. He had wanted listening to produce a perfect answer. Instead, listening had produced responsibility. "What about the 2 businesses we cannot keep in place?" he asked. Claire opened a memo. "One owner prefers a permanent move if we cover build-out costs. The other wants first right of return in the completed project. Put both in writing before we announce anything." Daniel studied him. "You have decided." Nicholas nodded. "We move forward with the revised ground floor. We preserve the 3 facades that passed structural review, keep the old tree and bench, phase construction around the 5 businesses that can remain, and fund temporary relocation for the others." Daniel tapped a finger against the table. "And the return? Lower. And the schedule? Longer. And if investors ask why?" Nicholas sat down. "Then I tell them the truth. We priced demolition. We priced construction. We priced delays. What we did not price correctly was the cost of emptying the block and trying to manufacture activity afterward." Daniel gave him a long look. "That sounds almost sentimental." "It is a financial argument. It is also a values argument." Nicholas considered that. Yes. The admission felt strangely freeing. Harborline had taught him that every spreadsheet already contained values, hidden inside assumptions about what counted as a cost. Claire closed her laptop halfway. "There is one more issue. The board will want a formal explanation, not a speech, a framework." "Good." Daniel smiled faintly. "You really have changed." Nicholas looked at him. "I hope I have become more accurate." That afternoon he presented the revised plan to the board. Why preserve older facades when new construction would be simpler? Because the structural cost was manageable and the existing street identity reduced leasing uncertainty. Why keep small tenants whose rents were below projected market rates? Because a fully leased block on opening day had value that a row of polished vacancies did not. Why accept a 6-month extension? Because rushing to protect the old schedule would force decisions that created larger risks later. One board member asked the question Nicholas had expected. "Is this connected to the woman you have been seeing?" The room became still. Nicholas did not become defensive. "She asked me one question that exposed a weakness in our process," he said. "That is true. She is not involved in this decision. Her organization has formally separated her from any position on the project, and she has refused to advise me privately." "Then why mention her at all?" "Because pretending I discovered the problem alone would be dishonest." He paused. "But if you are asking whether we are spending company money to impress someone I am dating, the answer is no. If Mia disappeared from my life tomorrow, I would still recommend this plan." The board approved the revised direction by a clear majority, not unanimously. Nicholas preferred that. When the meeting ended, he returned to his office and looked at his phone. He wanted to call Mia and know whether she was proud of him. Instead, he put the phone down. The city planning packet would be updated the next morning. Mia could learn about the decision through the same public process as everyone else connected to Harborline. That boundary mattered. At 7, Nicholas left the office earlier than anyone expected. Evan was near the elevator carrying a laptop bag. "How did it go?" he asked. "Approved." Evan smiled. "Congratulations." Nicholas nodded. There had been distance between them since the blind date. Evan had apologized to Mia in a short email, and she had accepted without inviting further conversation. Nicholas was learning that repair did not mean pretending nothing had happened. Evan pressed the elevator button. "Dinner?" Nicholas almost said no automatically. Then he stopped. "Somewhere normal." Evan looked offended. "I know normal places. You once called a restaurant casual because the valet wore sneakers. That was casual." Nicholas laughed. It was the first easy laugh they had shared in weeks. They ate at a small diner near the office. They spoke about basketball, staffing problems, Evan's daughter's science project, and eventually Harborline. Near the end of dinner, Evan said, "I keep thinking about that first night." Nicholas waited. "I thought I was helping you loosen up," Evan continued. But I think I liked being the person who knew what you needed. It made me feel useful. Nicholas looked at him. That sounds familiar. Evan nodded. Yeah, I figured it might. The next morning, Mia saw the updated Harbour Line packet while standing beside the Cultural Centre copier. She read the summary once, then again. The revised direction had been selected: preserved storefronts, phased construction, relocation support, and the old tree and bench kept on the site plan. Lena appeared beside her. That face means something happened. Mia turned the screen. Lena read quickly. He did it. Mia shook her head. They did it. Lena looked at her. You are being very careful with pronouns. I am being accurate. But Mia could not hide the smile. Her phone remained silent. Nicholas did not call for praise. That mattered more than she expected. At lunchtime, she sent him one message. Saw the packet. It looks like a decision you can explain honestly. Nicholas replied several minutes later. I think so. Then another message appeared. Dinner Friday. No project talk. Mia smiled at the screen. Yes. That evening, Nicholas returned home to his quiet apartment. For once, the silence did not feel like proof that he had protected himself from complication. It felt temporary. On the kitchen counter sat one of Teresa's containers, finally washed and ready to return. Beside it was a handwritten note from his mother, reminding him of her Saturday visit. Nicholas looked around at the clean rooms, the expensive furniture, and the almost complete absence of anything accidental. He had spent years believing a well-managed life was one in which every inconvenience had been removed. Now, for the first time, he wondered whether some inconveniences were simply evidence that other people had been allowed to matter. Saturday morning brought a problem Nicholas had not anticipated. His mother arrived early. Eleanor Vance had spent most of her adult life in rooms where punctuality was considered basic courtesy, which meant that when she said she would arrive at 11, she appeared in Nicholas's lobby at 10:42, carrying a canvas overnight bag and a small pot of rosemary from her garden in Monterey. Nicholas opened the apartment door and looked at the plant. Is that for me? It is for your kitchen. I have a kitchen. I know. The rosemary will help prove it. He laughed and kissed her cheek. Eleanor stepped inside, paused, and looked around. What? Nothing. That means something. She set down the plant. Your apartment looks less like a hotel. Nicholas followed her gaze. Teresa's returned container was on the counter beside two mugs. A community meeting flyer was tucked beneath a magazine. A photograph Mia had given him from the neighborhood showcase rested against a shelf, still waiting for a frame. You noticed 3 objects. I am your mother. 3 objects are a revolution. Nicholas took her bag toward the guest room. He had finally told Eleanor the complete story of how he met Mia 2 nights earlier. He expected surprise. What he had received over the phone was a silence so precise that he had known she was reorganizing her opinion of several people he had called friends for years. Now, while he made coffee, Eleanor sat at the counter. Are you nervous? She asked. No. You have adjusted that coffee scoop 4 times. Nicholas looked down. I am not nervous about you meeting Mia. Then what? I don't want anyone to make the meeting larger than it is. Eleanor smiled. That is a very large sentence for a small meeting. He sighed. An hour later, Mia arrived carrying nothing. Nicholas opened the door. You followed instructions. Your mother did not tell me to bring anything. Excellent. Eleanor appeared behind him. Mia. Mrs. Vance? Eleanor, please. They shook hands, and for one dangerous second, Nicholas imagined the formality might remain all afternoon. Then Eleanor looked at Mia's empty hands. Good. He has finally met someone who can arrive without a gift. Mia smiled. I was told there would be a test. Nicholas closed his eyes. This is going badly already. It went well. They drove to a small waterfront restaurant in Sausalito that Eleanor had chosen because, as she explained, I refuse to meet someone important to my son while a server describes foam. Nicholas protested that he did not regularly eat foam. Mia said, Spiritually, you do. Eleanor laughed. Nicholas realized then that the afternoon no longer belonged to him. At lunch, Eleanor asked Mia about the cultural center, her family, and the neighborhood archive. Mia asked Eleanor about Monterey, gardening, and the years when Nicholas was studying architecture. That last subject produced information Nicholas would have preferred to keep buried. He once redesigned our garage on graph paper, Eleanor said. I was 14. He charged me an imaginary permit. Fee. Mia stared at him. You invoiced your mother. It was educational. For whom? Nicholas gave up. After lunch, they walked along the water. The bay was bright under a thin layer of clouds, and sailboats moved beyond the marina. Eleanor and Mia fell several steps behind Nicholas when he stopped to answer a short call from Claire. When he rejoined them, both women became suspiciously quiet. What happened? Nothing, Mia said. Eleanor looked toward the water. Nicholas pointed between them. I know what that means. Mia smiled. Your mother showed me a picture of you at 17. He turned to Eleanor. You brought photographs? Only one. You planned this? Of course. Later, while Mia was inside a bookstore near the ferry landing, Eleanor stood beside Nicholas on the sidewalk. You like her? It was not a question. Yes. More than you expected. Yes. Eleanor watched pedestrians pass. Do you trust yourself with that? Nicholas frowned. What does that mean? You have always been good at controlling the conditions around you. Work, home, schedules, money. You are less comfortable when something matters and you cannot manage the outcome. He put his hands in his coat pockets. I am trying not to manage this. I can see that. Is that approval? It is observation. He smiled. Eleanor's expression softened. When you told me how you met her, I was angry for both of you. Then I realized you were telling the story as if the terrible beginning had given you permission to become a better man. Nicholas looked at her. That is not what I meant. I know. But be careful with that story. Mia is not a lesson that arrived to improve you. The words were gentle, they still struck him. Nicholas looked through the bookstore window. Mia stood near a display table reading the back of a book. I know. Good. Eleanor touched his arm. Then enjoy knowing her. That evening, after Eleanor returned to Nicholas's apartment to rest, he drove Mia back toward Daly City. They stopped for tea at a small place near Mission Street. It was crowded enough that they had to share a narrow table near the door. Mia wrapped both hands around her cup. I like your mother. She likes you. How do you know? She did not ask a single question about my work after you arrived. That is your standard. It is significant, Mia laughed. Nicholas became quieter. She said something to me today. That sounds ominous. She reminded me that you are not a lesson in my personal development. Mia studied him. Your mother is good. Disturbingly. He looked at her directly. I think I have been careful not to turn you into that. But I also know I talk about how much has changed since we met. Things can change because you meet someone, Mia said. That does not mean the person belongs to the change. Nicholas nodded. That is what I am learning. Mia took a sip of tea. You are learning a lot for someone who once charged his mother imaginary permit fees. That information was confidential. Nothing is confidential once mothers meet girlfriends. Nicholas went still. Mia did too. The word had arrived without planning. Girlfriend. She lowered her cup. Well, Nicholas smiled slowly. That answered a question. Did it? I was going to ask whether we were still finding out if we wanted to date. Mia considered him. And now? Now I am trying not to look too pleased with one accidental noun. You are failing. I know. Mia smiled. Then, deliberately, she reached across the table and placed her hand over his. We are dating. Nicholas turned his hand beneath hers and held it gently. No feasibility study. None. No committee? Absolutely none. That seems reckless. It is, he laughed. Outside, buses moved through the evening traffic, and fog had begun settling over the hills. There was no announcement, no expensive gesture, and no perfect line to mark the moment. Only 2 cups of tea, 1 crowded table, and a decision neither of them had been tricked, pressured, or persuaded into making. Nicholas had spent years thinking certainty arrived before commitment. With Mia, he was learning something quieter. Sometimes commitment was simply choosing to continue before every answer was known. The public review for Harbour Line took place 6 weeks later in a municipal hearing room that was too bright, too cold, and designed for nobody to feel comfortable. Nicholas considered that appropriate. Rows of residents, business owners, planners, reporters, consultants, and neighborhood advocates filled the room. Vance Urban Partners occupied one side. City staff sat at a long table in front. Mia arrived alone and took a seat near the back. She was not there for the cultural center. Evelyn had assigned formal comments to another staff member. Mia attended, because Harbour Line had become part of a larger question she cared about: whether a city could change without treating everything already there as disposable. Nicholas noticed her before the meeting started. He gave her a small nod. She returned it. Nothing more. The revised plan appeared on the screen. It was not the same image Mia had criticized at their first dinner. The polished plaza had narrowed. Existing storefronts remained visible. 3 older facades were preserved. Delivery access had been added. The old street tree stood exactly where it had before, with the faded green bench beneath it. Family-sized apartments had increased. The relocation plan for affected businesses was summarized beside the construction schedule. The rendering was still a rendering, but it no longer pretended the block began with the project. Nicholas spoke for less than 10 minutes. He described what had changed, what had not, and what the company could not promise. "We heard requests to reduce the building," he said. "We also heard requests to add more housing. We cannot fully do both. We heard from businesses that want slower phased construction and residents who want the disruption finished quickly. Those goals conflict." Several people nodded. "So this plan is not a collection of every request we received. It is a set of decisions we believe we can explain, where we could preserve continuity without making the project unworkable. We did. Where we could not, we built support around the disruption. And where reasonable people disagreed, we are showing the trade-off rather than pretending it disappeared." Mia watched the room. That was what impressed her most. Nicholas did not ask anyone to applaud the company for listening. He did not describe Harbour Line as a gift to the neighborhood. He described it as a project with consequences. Public comment lasted nearly 2 hours. Some people supported the revision, others thought it remained too large. One speaker argued that preserving old facades was cosmetic if rents continued rising nearby. Another said the project's additional housing mattered more than the appearance of the storefronts. A business owner thanked the company for guaranteeing his temporary relocation. A nearby resident complained that construction would still make parking miserable. Nicholas listened from the front row. He did not look pleased when people praised him or injured when they criticized him. Mia remembered the man she had met months earlier, a man who had been accustomed to entering rooms with an answer. This version of Nicholas looked more tired. He also looked more grounded. When the hearing ended, the Planning Commission approved the revised direction subject to routine technical conditions. Nicholas shook hands with his team. Claire exhaled as if she had been holding her breath for 6 weeks. Daniel said, "Now we have to build the thing." Nicholas smiled. That was always the inconvenient part. Near the back, Mia waited while people moved toward the exits. Evan approached her first. He stopped several feet away. "Hi, Mia." "Hi." He seemed more nervous than Nicholas had ever looked at a board meeting. "I know I already apologized by email. I'm not here to repeat it." "Okay. I just wanted to say thank you for answering." Mia nodded. "I accepted the apology because it was an apology, not because I wanted you to keep carrying it." Evan looked surprised. She continued, "You made a poor decision. You understood that. Do something useful with the understanding." A small smile appeared on his face. "Nico says things like that now." "Then he is stealing from my family." "I suspected." They both laughed lightly. Across the room, Nicholas saw them speaking, but did not interfere. That mattered too. Marcus had never contacted Mia directly. Brooke had told her that he wanted to apologize, but Mia had declined. She did not need every person involved in the first dinner to complete an emotional assignment for her. Marcus's responsibility was to change his own behavior, not obtain her approval. Brooke, however, had quietly become useful to the Harbour Line outreach team, not as punishment, not as a public act of redemption. She had volunteered to help with logistics after realizing how little she understood about community work, then discovered that setting up translation tables and childcare sign-in sheets was less glamorous and more important than making speeches. Mia had seen her twice. They were polite, that was enough. Outside the hearing room, Nicholas finally reached Mia. "Well?" he asked. She raised an eyebrow. "You want a grade?" "No. You look like you want a grade." "I want an opinion." "That is dangerously close." He smiled. Mia looked back through the glass doors at the emptying room. "You explained the trade-offs." "I tried. You did not pretend everyone agreed." "They definitely did not. And the bench survived." Nicholas nodded seriously. The bench had an aggressive constituency. One sticky note. Very persuasive. They walked outside. The afternoon was windy. Nicholas loosened his tie. Mia looked at him. "You know this is not finished. Construction has not even started. I mean the listening." "I know. Once the project is approved, that is usually when people discover whether the promises were real." Nicholas nodded. "We are keeping the tenant meetings through construction." "Good." He looked at her. "Can I say something personal now that we are outside?" "Depends. I am glad you were here." Mia smiled. "I am glad I came." They began walking toward a nearby cafe, but Nicholas stopped when his phone rang. "Claire," he answered. His expression changed after several seconds. "What?" Mia waited. Nicholas listened, then looked toward the hearing building. "Send it to me. I'll call you back." He ended the call. "Problem?" Mia asked. "Possibly." "What happened?" "One of the businesses we planned to relocate temporarily just lost the replacement space. The other landlord changed terms." Mia watched him. Months earlier, Nicholas might have treated the news as a logistical irritation to be solved as quickly as possible. Now he was already looking back at the building, calculating who needed to be called and who would be affected. "I should go," he said. Mia nodded. "You should." He hesitated. "Our coffee?" "Can wait." Nicholas smiled. Then he turned serious. "Thank you." "For what?" "For not making me choose between being present with you and doing the thing I said I would do." Mia shook her head. "You do not get points for keeping commitments." "I know." "Good." Nicholas leaned closer and kissed her forehead softly, then headed back toward the building. Mia watched him leave. The gesture that moved her was not the kiss. It was the direction he had walked afterward, back toward the problem, back toward the people his company had promised to support, back toward responsibility when there was no audience left to impress. That evening, the replacement space issue was solved through a short-term lease in another storefront 2 blocks away. It cost more than planned. Nicholas approved it anyway. No press release mentioned it. Mia only learned days later when the business owner told her during a neighborhood event. That was when she understood that Nicholas's change had become real. Not because he had chosen the more thoughtful option once, because he was beginning to choose it when nobody important was watching. 8 months later, the first phase of Harbour Line was still mostly scaffolding, temporary fences, and people in reflective vests. Nicholas had learned that meaningful change rarely photographed well in the middle. The preserved facades were braced behind steel supports. 2 businesses operated from temporary spaces nearby. 3 others remained open behind signs explaining how customers could reach them around construction. The old tree stood behind a protective barrier, and the bench had been removed for restoration after a contractor discovered one leg was splitting. Mia found that detail disproportionately funny. "You preserved the bench so aggressively that now it is getting better health care than most furniture," she said. Nicholas stood beside her at the edge of the site. "It has political influence. It has one anonymous supporter. We cannot underestimate them." They had stopped by after brunch on a Sunday. Neither had planned the visit. They were walking toward the waterfront when Mia asked whether the bench had survived demolition work, and Nicholas suggested they check. That kind of unplanned detour had become normal between them, so had smaller disagreements. Nicholas still answered work messages too quickly during meals. Mia still waited too long before admitting when she was overwhelmed. He liked making plans weeks in advance. She liked deciding on Saturday morning what Saturday would contain. He preferred an empty kitchen counter. She could somehow occupy one with 3 tote bags, a camera, mail, and a notebook within minutes. Their relationship had not turned either of them into easier people. It had made them more honest ones. Mia's life had changed too. The neighborhood exhibit she had developed became the foundation for a larger oral history project funded by a regional arts grant. Evelyn promoted her to program director, putting her in charge of a small team collecting family photographs, recorded memories and business histories from communities across the peninsula. When the Cultural Center later received an invitation to compete for a public history installation at Harbour Line, Mia immediately removed herself from the proposal and selection process. Nicholas did the same from the company side. Another committee selected the winning team. The Cultural Center won anyway. Mia called Nicholas after Evelyn gave her the news. "This is awkward." "Why?" "Because now my organization is doing work inside your project." "You were recused." "So were you." "Then 2 systems functioned." She laughed. "You sound proud of bureaucracy." "I have grown." The resulting installation would not celebrate Vance Urban Partners. That had been one of Mia's conditions before her recusal. It would document the block before, during, and after redevelopment, including businesses that moved, businesses that stayed, disagreements over the project, and changes residents did not like. Nicholas approved the concept without edits. "You know, some of it may criticize us," Claire warned. "It should." Claire stared at him. "You have become exhausting in a new direction. I appreciate the consistency." That evening, Nicholas drove to Daly City for Sunday dinner. By then, he no longer arrived like a guest. Teresa still told him to sit down whenever he tried to help too early, but she also asked him to carry folding chairs from the garage. Ramon no longer called him Nicholas with ceremonial seriousness. He called him Nico, and argued with him about property taxes. Joel had added Nicholas to the family basketball group chat, a privilege Nicholas considered more demanding than most board memberships. Eleanor had become part of the orbit too. She visited Daly City every few months, and Teresa had visited Monterey twice. The 2 women exchanged garden photographs, recipes, and opinions about their adult children, with a level of efficiency that worried both Mia and Nicholas. At dinner that Sunday, Eleanor was already seated beside Teresa when Nicholas arrived. He stopped in the doorway. "No one told me my mother was here." Eleanor looked offended. "I am capable of traveling independently." Teresa waved a serving spoon. "We are planning Thanksgiving." "It is August," Mia said. "Exactly," both mothers replied. Joel whispered to Nicholas, "We have lost control." "I am not sure we ever had it." After dinner, everyone moved into the living room. Family photographs played in a slideshow on the television because Teresa had discovered cloud albums and now considered every gathering an opportunity for archival review. A picture appeared of Mia at 13, standing in front of the Santos family's first Daly City apartment with a backpack almost as large as she was. Nicholas looked at her. "You had bangs." Mia pointed at the screen. "That photograph is protected information." Ramon smiled. "She hated California for the first 6 months." "I did not hate California. You said the fog was depressing." "I was 12, Teresa corrected him. 13 in that picture." Mia leaned back against the couch. "I missed Quezon City. I missed cousins. I missed knowing how everything worked." Nicholas looked again at the photograph. "You look brave." "I was miserable." "Those can happen at the same time." Mia turned toward him. The room remained noisy around them, but the sentence settled quietly. Later, Nicholas found Eleanor alone in the kitchen wrapping leftover dessert. "You look happy," she said. He opened a cabinet for containers. "I am." "Successful too?" He smiled. "That question used to be reversed." "I know." Nicholas looked toward the living room. Mia was laughing at something Joel had said, while Teresa argued with Ramon about whether an old photograph had been taken in 2003 or 2004. "I think I confused success with being difficult to disappoint," he said. Eleanor waited. "If I stayed busy enough, controlled enough, useful enough, then I never had to depend too much on anyone. And now half my weekends involve carrying chairs for Teresa." Eleanor smiled. "Terrifying." "It is." He became serious. "But I like being expected somewhere." His mother's expression softened. "You always were." Nicholas looked at her. "I know that now." When he and Mia left later, they walked instead of driving immediately. Fog pressed low over the neighborhood, softening porch lights and traffic signals. Mia tucked her hands into her coat pockets. "What did your mother say to you?" "That I look happy. She is observant. I told her I like being expected somewhere." Mia slowed. Nicholas did too. He had not intended the sentence to become important a second time. Mia looked at him. "You are expected here." "I know. And in Monterey." "I know. And at work, although perhaps excessively." "Definitely excessively," she smiled. Nicholas reached for her hand. "I spent a long time building a life where nobody could interrupt me." Mia threaded her fingers through his. "And? It turns out interruption was not the problem." "What was?" He considered it. Thinking peace meant nothing could ask anything of me. They continued walking. At the corner, a bus passed through the fog, briefly illuminating them in its headlights. Mia leaned her shoulder against his. Nicholas did not know what the next year would contain. Harbour Line still had construction problems ahead. Mia's new role would demand more of her. Their families had already begun planning holidays with alarming confidence. For once, uncertainty did not feel like a threat to be managed. It felt like room, and Nicholas was finally learning how to live inside it. 1 year after the blind date, Nicholas stood beneath the old tree at Harbour Line and watched people use the block in ways no rendering had predicted. A child balanced along the edge of a planter, while her father carried grocery bags. 2 office workers argued over where to eat lunch. A delivery driver waited impatiently for a loading space. The repair shop had rolled bicycles onto the sidewalk. The small market displayed fruit beneath a new awning, and the restored green bench was occupied by 3 older women who showed no sign of leaving. The place was imperfect. Nicholas loved that. The first phase of Harbour Line had opened that morning. Construction remained on the northern half, but the street-level businesses were operating, and the public walkway connected old storefronts to the new residential entrance. A temporary exhibit filled one wall beside the plaza. Before, during, after. The cultural center had installed photographs, interviews, maps, and short accounts from people connected to the block. Some captions celebrated what had been preserved. Others documented complaints, moves, and compromises. One panel showed the first polished rendering beside a photograph of the old street. Nicholas had insisted both remain. Mia stood near the exhibit, speaking with a family whose restaurant appeared in 3 photographs. She wore the same deep green color she had worn the night they met. Nicholas noticed immediately. When she finally reached him, she looked down at herself. "Do not make it sentimental." "I did not say anything. Your face did." "I was going to say, you look beautiful." "That is acceptable." He smiled. Around them, the opening was modest. Folding chairs, food from neighborhood businesses, city staff, residents, construction workers, investors, families, and people who had spent the last year arguing about details most visitors would never notice. Claire stood near the entrance, talking to Daniel. Evan had brought his daughter, who was photographing the tree because she had heard enough stories about the bench to consider it a landmark. Brooke was helping distribute printed copies of the business directory. Marcus was not there. Nicholas had remained civil with him, but the friendship had become distant. Teresa and Eleanor sat together beneath an umbrella, comparing photographs on their phones. Joel approached Nicholas carrying 2 plates. "Your mother and my mother are planning Christmas." "It is September." "I know." Nicholas took 1 plate. "Can we stop them?" Joel looked toward the women. "No." "Good assessment." Mia joined them. My mother wants to know whether the Harbour Line apartments have a community room large enough for family. Parties? Nicholas stared at her. That is not what zoning was designed for. Coward. Before he could answer, a city planner asked him to make a few remarks. Nicholas had prepared 3 pages. He used less than 1. He acknowledged that the project had changed because people had challenged assumptions early enough for those challenges to matter. Then he stopped. A year earlier, he would have wanted the speech to explain the lesson. Now he understood that character was not a final design. It was maintenance. So he ended simply. This block existed before our company arrived, and it will belong to the people who use it long after today. Our responsibility was never to make the story begin with us. It was to build the next part without erasing the pages already here. Thank you for making us work harder to do that. The applause was brief. After the formal opening ended, people began drifting away. Teresa left with 3 containers of food she claimed would otherwise be wasted. Eleanor accepted a ride with her. Joel announced that he was meeting friends and disappeared before anyone could assign him cleanup. By late afternoon, Mia and Nicholas were walking through the quieter block. They stopped at the restored bench. It was finally empty. Mia sat. Nicholas joined her. For several moments neither spoke. A year earlier, their first evening had been arranged by people who believed 2 lives could be reduced to categories: millionaire developer, non-profit worker, Pacific Heights, Daly City, corporate circles, Filipina family, different worlds. The categories had not been false. They had simply been too small. Mia looked toward the public history wall. You know what is strange? What? If Brooke had never arranged that dinner, we probably would not be sitting here. Nicholas nodded. I have thought about that. Do you ever feel grateful it happened? He considered the question carefully. I am grateful I met you. I am not grateful they used you to arrange it. Mia smiled. That is the correct answer. I have had time to prepare. She nudged him with her shoulder. Nicholas looked at the people crossing the plaza. I used to want to rewrite the beginning. Of us? Yes. Why? Because it was embarrassing, complicated, not something I would have chosen. Mia waited. And now? Now I think choosing what happens after the beginning matters more. She rested her hand on the bench between them. That sounds suspiciously philosophical for a developer. I spend time with community educators. Dangerous habit. Nicholas laughed. Then he became quiet. There is something I want to ask you. Mia immediately looked at his jacket pockets. He noticed. It is not a ring. She exhaled. You cannot say that right before a serious question. I thought it would reduce pressure. It created several new kinds. He smiled, then looked toward the street. My lease is up in 4 months. Mia blinked. That is your serious question? No. Good. Nicholas continued. I do not want you to move into my apartment. Her eyebrows rose. This conversation is developing badly. He laughed. What I mean is, I do not want the next step to be you fitting yourself into a life I designed before I knew you. Mia's expression changed. Nicholas looked at her. I want us to choose a place together. If you want that too. Somewhere neither of us is visiting. Somewhere we both get to be inconvenient. For once, Mia had no immediate answer. Nicholas did not fill the silence. That was another thing he had learned. After a few seconds, she smiled. Can it have a kitchen larger than yours? Yes. Space for my archive boxes? Yes. Not all white furniture? He hesitated. Mia narrowed her eyes. Nico. I am growing. Answer the question. Yes. And somewhere my parents can reach without crossing 3 bridges? Yes. She took his hand. Then yes. Nicholas smiled, but Mia held up one finger. One condition. Of course. We choose slowly. He looked at her, then at the block around them. I think I finally know how. They remained on the bench as the afternoon light shifted across the buildings. Nothing about their future was guaranteed by money, good intentions, or one successful project. Harbour Line would need care. Their relationship would need care. Families would disagree. Work would become busy. Plans would change. But neither of them needed perfection anymore. Mia had learned that dignity did not depend on being chosen by the most impressive person in the room. Nicholas had learned that strength did not mean controlling every outcome. Both had learned that a meaningful life was built less by dramatic gestures than by ordinary decisions repeated when nobody was watching. To stay curious, to listen before answering, to make room without erasing what was already there, to let people be more complicated than the categories assigned to them. The first night others had arranged the table. Everything important afterward had been chosen by Mia and Nicholas themselves. And perhaps that was what new beginnings really were. Not the chance to erase an imperfect past. The chance to decide with patience and courage what deserved to be built next.